Okay, here's chapter 10, recording 2. So we're talking about respiration, so that actual exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide at the cellular level. You have two different forms of respiration. You've got external respiration, also known as pulmonary respiration, and you've got internal. Your external respiration is where the oxygen and carbon dioxide exchanges in the alveoli, so in the lungs. In your lungs, within your alveoli, those sacs are very, very thin and they are very flexible. So you have a substance called surfactant, which reduces water surface tension to try and keep those alveoli open so that that gas exchange can actually occur. In patients that have COPD or they've smoked too long and their lungs are damaged, part of what that does is that it actually inhibits or destroys that surfactant as one of the side effects. And so when they end up breathing out, they don't have that amount of surfactant. And so their alveoli start collapsing. Patients with emphysema are extremely prone to this. And so what they end up doing is they breathe in and out through pursed lips. So like they're trying to whistle, essentially. And what this does is it keeps back pressure in the lungs so that those alveoli can't collapse on themselves as easily because they still have pressure from that air inside of them. This is called PEEPing, positive end expiratory pressure. So we can do this for them, but a patient that has emphysema that's having problems breathing is going to end up naturally PEEPing themselves. Internal respiration now is the exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide within the cells, so systemic circulation and the actual cells of the body. Oxygen passes from the capillaries into the cells because of, again, those partial pressures. In the blood, it's pretty high. In the cells, it's pretty low. And so we're trying to equal that out. Carbon dioxide, a waste product of all of the metabolic processes that go on within our cell, end up having to go out to the blood to get breathed out of the system. Remember again that CO2 within the body is synonymous with acid. The more CO2 that you have within the body, the more acidic the body becomes. And when we have a change in pH like that, we get very, very, very sick. And we can even die based on a change in pH that goes uncorrected. Eventually, all cells will die if deprived of oxygen. All of them. That is something that is absolutely critical. So when we start running out of oxygen or becoming hypoxic, you have about a minute before your heart starts to get angry. You've got 4 minutes where, yeah, you're hypoxic, but your brain not really doing a whole lot. Once you get past that 4-minute mark, brain damage becomes possible, not guaranteed, but possible. 6 to 10 minutes, brain damage is pretty likely. After you get past 10 minutes, you have brain damage that you can't fix anymore. Your brain does not regenerate like a lot of other cells in your body. Your heart, same thing. Once it is damaged, it doesn't fix itself. So you have long-term issues. So how do we actually control respiration? Now, we talked about this a little bit, but I'll go into it a little bit more here. But you have those chemoreceptors that monitor chemicals within your blood. They're going to measure a few different factors. Oxygen, they're going to measure carbon dioxide, hydrogen ions. Remember, for our purposes, we're going to tie carbon dioxide and hydrogen ions together. And then they're going to look at the pH of the cerebral spinal fluid. So that fluid that flows around your blood, or around your brain, and your spinal cord, it's going to monitor the pH of that. Your brain is extremely sensitive to pH changes, so we want to make sure that things are okay there. And then you actually take that feedback from the blood, from these sensors, and it goes up to the respiratory centers of the brain. Your respiratory centers are right there in your brainstem, and it's going to say, hey, we either need to breathe faster, we need to breathe slower, we need to breathe more deeply, we need to breathe more shallow, to try and make sure that the nature of the blood stays relatively constant. When your ventilation, the bringing air in and out of your lungs, and your blood flow don't match, or the oxygen demand within the body doesn't match how you're bringing it in, you get a ventilation perfusion ratio mismatch. So what ends up happening? Well, either you're bringing the air in, but it's not exchanging, meaning that you're not getting the oxygen into the blood where it needs to be. And there's several factors that can influence that. Lack of oxygen overall in the bloodstream. So you're getting it in, you're exchanging it, but it's just not going where it needs to go. The recirculation of carbon dioxide, so you've picked it up from the tissues and you've brought it to the lungs, but it's not leaving the body like it should. And so what's going to keep happening is it's just going to keep floating around in the body. And then severe hypoxemia. So hypoxemia is where you don't have enough oxygen in the blood. When you have too much carbon dioxide, you're not going to have enough oxygen. It has to switch. When you're recirculating carbon dioxide, you end up getting very, very, very sick. So there's several different factors that affect pulmonary ventilation. First and foremost, you have to keep the airway open. You have to keep it what we call patent. If you can't get the air into the lungs, you're done right there. The other factors within the lungs, if you have infections or some sort of fluid in the lungs, you're not going to get that gas exchange because it's going to actually obstruct the meeting point of your lung tissue and your vasculature tissue. You're not going to be able to have that exchange there. Allergic reactions, what allergic reactions do, especially within the lungs, is they cause everything to constrict due to swelling. And so you can't actually get that air down to the alveoli. It's not just about getting it into the lungs, getting it into the trachea, getting it into the bronchi. You actually have to get it all the way out to the end to those alveoli. If you take your airway and constrict it down, that air is not going to be able to move. If your patient is unresponsive, their muscles all relax. The biggest obstruction of the airway, especially in an unresponsive patient, is their tongue. That's why we position the airway to make sure that we pull that tongue up out of the way. Extrinsic factors that have nothing to do with the lung itself as far as trying to exchange. Trauma can cause several different issues with lung tissue itself. Kind of depends on what that trauma does. And then foreign body airway obstruction, also known as choking. If we have something that is outside of the lung, we have a big piece of steak that ends up lodging itself in there. Obviously, we can't get air in anymore. Some factors that affect respiration. Oxygen and perfusion need to function efficiently. So you have to have the oxygen. The oxygen actually has to move. How we can change some of that are external and internal factors. External factors would be like atmospheric pressure. If your atmospheric pressure changes, either becomes too high, you're going to force oxygen into the blood. If it becomes too low, it's not going to. So going up high in a mountain, first and foremost, there is less oxygen up there overall, so lower concentration. But then you also have a change in pressure. There's less when you go up high. So not only is there less oxygen available, but it's also not going to want to exchange as much. When you go the other way and you start diving, pressure gets really, really heavy in water. It goes up as far as ratings. And so you tend to take in more oxygen. Now, obviously, water doesn't have oxygen that we can take in, but what we use are called hyperbaric chambers. So their pressure is greater than that of the atmospheric pressure, and it actually forces more oxygen into your blood. Other internal factors, there's certain conditions that reduce the surface for gas exchange. So any sort of lung disease, so COPD, emphysema, pulmonary edema can also do that, pneumonia, that affect the ability for that gas exchange to occur. You can have circulatory compromise that doesn't allow for respiration. So you're getting the air in, the air is exchanging, but for some reason that oxygen is not getting where it needs to be in the tissues. A couple of causes for that: blood loss. If you don't have enough red blood cells that have enough hemoglobin to bind up that oxygen, it's not going to get taken to all of the tissues. You have to have enough blood. Anemia affects the hemoglobin, or the amount of hemoglobin that's actually on those red blood cells. So you might have plenty of blood cells, but they're not built correctly to be able to accept that oxygen. This goes into hypovolemic shock. So if we have a decrease in blood volume, we don't have enough red blood cells, we don't have enough oxygen that's getting to our tissues. We also have vasodilatory shock. So this, you have a increase in the blood vessel diameter, which decreases blood pressure, which means that blood that's in your body, you may have enough of it, but it's not going to move around adequately to actually oxygenate your tissues. Any patient that you think is in shock, irregardless of what type, should be treated aggressively. So you're going to want to give them oxygen. What we want to try and do with giving a patient that's in shock oxygen is we want to overload their system with oxygen, which gives them more of a chance of getting it out to their tissues. In order to realize what's going on with our patient, we need to know what normal is. So normal, 12 to 20 breaths per minute, a regular pattern of inhalation and exhalation. So it's a very nice steady flow. You have bilateral, clear, and equal lung sounds. So there's no sounds that indicate that there's something wrong within the lungs themselves. You have regular, equal chest rise and fall. Both sides of your chest should rise at the same time and should fall at the same time. And then you want to assess for adequate depth. So that tidal volume, how much air they're taking in that one breath in order to take enough oxygen into the body. So abnormal breathing. So if they're breathing less than 12 times a minute, that's called bradypnea, brady meaning slow. If they're breathing more than 20 breaths per minute, that's called tachypnea, so tachy meaning fast. If they have an irregular rhythm, so instead of breathing in and breathing out, breathing in, breathing out, they're doing something completely off the wall. If they have diminished, absent, or just noisy sounds within their lungs when they're breathing, something's not right. And then if they have a reduced flow of air at the nose or mouth, generally it's going to be coming out. They just have a reduced flow. So again, we talked about those emphysemic patients, how they actually try and retain some of that air by peeping themselves. That is a reduce of expired air because they're trying to keep it within their body. And we will go on in the next video.